I never thought my sister's wedding would be the day everything changed. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong when my invitation arrived just 3 days before the ceremony. The envelope, made of fancy parchment, looked like it held something important, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Kitchen staff entrance only. It read in elegant gold script, with a crude arrow drawn pointing to the back of the venue. Victoria had always been the golden child. She wore designer clothes, carried herself with confidence, and climbed the corporate ladder with perfectly manicured nails and heels I could never afford. While she was out in the world making deals, I chose to work with underprivileged children as a teacher. Our parents never let me forget the difference between us. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would say, shaking her head at my simple clothes and practical shoes. "Look at her, engaged to James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries, and what do you have to show for yourself?" What they didn't know was that I had plenty to show, just not in ways they could understand. My small apartment might not be impressive, but the smiles of my students when they finally grasp a difficult concept, those are worth more than any luxury condo. Still, I went to the wedding. Victoria was my sister, after all. Even though she'd grown more distant since getting engaged to James, I put on my best dress, not designer, but elegant in its simplicity, and drove my old Honda Civic to the Grand Plaza Hotel. When I arrived, the security guard at the main entrance looked at my invitation, then pointed to the back. "Service entrance only," he said, barely looking up. I swallowed my pride and made my way through the hotel's kitchen, where busy staff rushed around, preparing for what was clearly going to be an extravagant reception. A hostess led me to a small table tucked behind a large pillar, practically hidden from the main celebration. Victoria's instructions were very clear. The hostess said apologetically, family members who might embarrass the couple should be kept out of sight. I wanted to scream. My hands trembled as I sat down at the plastic table, a stark contrast to the fine china gleaming on all the other tables. There, next to my plastic fork, was a handwritten note in my sister's flowing script. "Know your place, little sister. Don't ruin this for me." I should have left. I should have walked out and never looked back, but something made me stay, perhaps the same stubborn determination that made me choose teaching over the corporate career my parents demanded. The ceremony was beautiful, of course. I watched from my hidden corner as Victoria floated down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my yearly salary. James Anderson waited at the altar, tall, distinguished, and handsome in that polished way that graces magazine covers, but something about his expression seemed strained. And then, he saw me. In that moment, as his eyes met mine across the crowded room, James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries, did something completely unexpected. He dropped his wedding ring. The small golden band made a distinct ping as it hit the marble floor, rolling until it came to rest right at my feet. As I bent to pick it up, memories from 15 years ago came flooding back. I was 19, working my way through college at a small coffee shop in Boston. He was 22, a regular customer who always ordered the same thing, a latte, no sugar. Back then, he wasn't James Anderson, CEO. He was just Jamie, a graduate student with dreams of changing the world through ethical business practices. We spent 6 beautiful months together, sharing dreams and plans for the future. He wanted to revolutionize corporate responsibility. I wanted to teach. We talked about combining our passions somehow, maybe starting a foundation for education. And then he disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye, just vanished from my life completely. I tried to find him, but it was like he had never existed. A year later, I saw his photo in a business magazine. James Anderson, heir to Anderson Industries, engaged to a wealthy socialite. My heart broke all over again. And now, here he was, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, while my sister, his bride, watched in confusion. "Jamie," I whispered, holding out his wedding ring. The color drained from his face, Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "James, darling, do you know my pathetic little sister?" But James wasn't looking at his bride anymore. His eyes were fixed on my left hand, where I still wore the small silver ring he'd given me 15 years ago at that coffee shop in Boston, the one with the inscription, "To my Emma, who taught me what really matters." "Emma," he breathed. And in that one word, I heard 15 years of regret. Victoria's voice turned sharp. "James, what's going on?" Before he could answer, a distinguished older man rose from the front row, Richard Anderson Sr., James's father and founder of Anderson Industries. His face was thunderous as he approached the altar. Son. His voice carried across the suddenly silent room. Please tell me this isn't the same Emma. The same Emma? The words hung in the air like storm clouds. What did he mean, the same Emma? James straightened his spine, and for a moment, I saw the Jamie I used to know, the one who wanted to change the world. Yes, Father, he said clearly, this is Emma Chin, the woman you paid $5 million to disappear 15 years ago. The room erupted into chaos. Victoria's perfect wedding dissolved into confusion. Guests began whispering. Phones started recording everything. My sister's face turned an interesting shade of red that clashed horribly with her white dress. $5 million? I stood up slowly, my teacher's salary suddenly feeling very different. You paid me to disappear? Richard Anderson Sr. straightened his expensive tie and glanced around at the guests. I paid your mother, he said, his voice tight with annoyance. She assured me you'd never contact James again. She said you agreed. It was for the best. My mother, of course. The pieces began falling into place. Mom's sudden insistence that I transfer universities that year, the mysterious deposit into my college fund, her constant reminders that Jamie, was out of my league. You knew. I turned to my mother, who was trying to disappear into her seat. You took money to separate us. It was for your own good, Mom said, standing, her designer dress rustling. Look at you, a teacher, living in a tiny apartment. James needed someone who could understand his world. Victoria was perfect for him. I never imagined my sister's wedding would be the day everything in my life turned upside down. Looking back, I should have suspected something was off when my invitation arrived just 3 days before the ceremony. In fancy, gold letters, it said, kitchen staff and trance only, with a messy arrow pointing to the back of the venue. Victoria, my sister, was always the perfect one. She'd built a career in the corporate world, wearing high heels and designer clothes, while I worked as a teacher, helping underprivileged children. Our parents never let me forget how different we were. Why can't you be more like your sister? Mom would ask, shaking her head at my plain clothes and sensible shoes. Look at her, engaged to James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries, and what do you have to show for yourself? What they didn't understand was that I had plenty to show, just not in ways they could see. My small apartment wasn't glamorous, but the joy I saw in my students' eyes when they finally understood a lesson meant more to me than any fancy house. But I still went to the wedding. After all, Victoria was my sister, even though we'd drifted apart since she'd gotten engaged to James. I put on my best dress, not designer, but still nice, and drove my old Honda Civic to the Grand Plaza Hotel. When I got to the front entrance, the security guard glanced at my invitation and told me to go around to the back. Service and trance only, he said, pointing to the rear of the building. I ended up walking through the hotel kitchen, dodging busy staff preparing for the grand reception. A hostess took me to a small table tucked away behind a pillar, hidden from the main celebration. Victoria's instructions were very clear, she said softly. Family members who might embarrass the couple should stay out of sight. I sat down, my hands shaking. The table was set with plastic plates and utensils, while the other guests dined with fine china. There was even a handwritten note in Victoria's flowing handwriting next to my plastic fork. Know your place, little sister, don't ruin this for me. I should have left right then. I should have walked out and never looked back, but something inside me, something stubborn, made me stay. The ceremony was beautiful. As expected, from my hidden corner, I watched Victoria walk down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my whole year's salary. James Anderson, the man she was about to marry, waited at the altar, tall, handsome, and well-groomed in his custom tuxedo, but there was something strange about the way he looked at her, like his mind was somewhere else. And then he saw me. His eyes met mine across the room, and in that moment, something unexpected happened. James dropped his wedding ring. The small gold band hit the marble floor with a sharp sound and rolled to a stop right at my feet. As I bent to pick it up, a flood of memories rushed back to me. 15 years ago, I was a 19-year-old college student working at a coffee shop in Boston. He was a 22-year-old graduate student who came in every day for a latte with no sugar. Back then, he wasn't James Anderson, CEO. He was Jamie, just Jamie. We spent 6 months together, talking about our dreams and plans for the future. He wanted to change the world through ethical business practices, and I wanted to teach. We even talked about starting a foundation to help kids like mine. And then, just like that, he vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. I tried to find him, but it was like he'd disappeared off the face of the earth. A year later, I saw his photo in a magazine. James Anderson, heir to Anderson Industries, engaged to a rich socialite. My heart broke all over again. And now here he was, staring at me like a ghost, while my sister watched in confusion. "Jamie," I whispered, holding out the ring. His face went pale, and Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "James, darling, do you know my pathetic little sister?" But James wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. His gaze was fixed on my left hand, where I still wore the small silver ring he'd given me all those years ago, the one with the inscription, "To my Emma, who taught me what really matters." "Emma," he whispered. And in that one word, I heard 15 years of regret. Victoria's voice turned sharp. "James, what's going on?" Before he could respond, an older man stood up from the front row, Richard Anderson Sr., James's father and the founder of Anderson Industries. He marched up to the altar with a thunderous look on his face. "Son," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "please tell me this isn't the same Emma." "The same Emma?" The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "What do you mean, the same Emma?" I asked, my voice shaking. James stood tall and faced his father. "Yes, father, this is Emma Chin, the woman you paid $5 million to disappear 15 years ago." The room erupted in shock. Victoria's perfect wedding dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered. Phones began recording. My sister's face turned a deep shade of red that didn't match her wedding dress. $5 million? I stood up, trying to process it all. "You paid me to disappear?" Richard Anderson Sr. looked uncomfortable. "I paid your mother," he muttered. "She assured me you'd never contact James again, said it was for the best." "My mother, of course." The pieces started falling into place. Mom had pushed me to transfer schools that year. She'd made sure I had the funds I needed to leave Boston, and she'd always insisted that James was out of my league. "You knew." I turned to my mother, who was trying to shrink into her chair. "You took money to separate us. It was for your own good," my mother said, standing up, adjusting her designer dress. "Look at you, a teacher, living in a tiny apartment." James needed someone who could understand his world. Victoria was perfect for him. "Perfect?" James laughed bitterly. "Perfect for the company image. You mean, just like that socialite you tried to set me up with after Emma left." "Did you tell Victoria about that, father? How you've been orchestrating my relationships for the past 15 years. Victoria finally spoke up. "James, darling, surely you're not comparing me to her. I mean, look at her dress, it's not even designer." James's voice softened. "No, it's handmade. Emma always said the best things are made with love, not money." He turned to me. "You still make your own clothes?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. He remembered. "This is ridiculous," Richard Anderson Sr. said, his voice booming. "Son, you have responsibilities." "The merger with Victoria's father's company." "The merger?" James cut him off. "Is that what this wedding is really about? A business deal?" Victoria's face turned pale. "What do you mean, a business deal? I'll be. You know." James turned to her. "Your father's company is failing. This marriage was meant to save it. That's why he pushed so hard for you to date me, isn't it?" Victoria's father jumped up. "Now see here." But James wasn't finished. He pulled a USB drive from his jacket pocket and waved it in the air. "I found some interesting documents last week, father, about what really happened 15 years ago, about the real reason you wanted Emma gone." Richard Anderson Sr.'s face drained of color. "Emma wasn't just my girlfriend back then," James continued, his voice sharp. "She was also volunteering at a youth center in South Boston, a youth center that was about to be demolished for one of our developments, a development that would have displaced hundreds of families." I remembered that fight. The community had been organizing protests, and I'd been helping. James, had been supportive, even talked about finding an alternative location for the development. "Emma was organizing the community," James said. "She was good at it, too." The media was starting to notice. If that development had failed, it would have cost the company millions, but more importantly, it would have shown that Anderson Industries could be beaten. He turned to his father. "That's why she had to go, right, father?" Richard Anderson Sr. slumped into his chair, defeated. "So you paid her mother to make her disappear," James said, his voice cold. "You erased all traces of our relationship. You even donated to her new university to ensure she'd get transferred. All of it carefully planned." "I did what was necessary for the company," his father muttered. The company, James said with a bitter laugh, the company that's now mine. He turned to the guests, now completely silent. Oh yes, as of last week, I'm the majority shareholder. Father signed over control as a wedding gift. Ironic, don't you think? He walked over to me, ignoring Victoria's protests. Emma, he said softly, I spent 15 years thinking you abandoned me. I tried to be the son my father wanted, but when I found these documents last week, I understood. I was going to stop this wedding, but when I saw your name on the guest list, seated in the kitchen, I added dryly. He smiled. Victoria always did have a flair for drama. He turned to my sister. The wedding's off. You might want to check your father's company's financials before he arranges another merger. Victoria screamed, throwing her bouquet at us. It hit a champagne tower, sending glasses crashing to the floor. As my first act as CEO, James announced, his voice calm amid the chaos, Anderson Industries is establishing a $100 million foundation for educational initiatives in underserved communities. He looked at me. We need a director who understands education and community organizing. Interested? My mother jumped to her feet. Emma, darling, I always knew you had potential. Save it, I said, cutting her off. I think you've done enough helping for one lifetime. I turned to James. The foundation job, does it come with a corner office? He grinned. Only if you'll have dinner with me first. I know this little coffee shop in Boston. You can't do this, Victoria screamed. Daddy, do something. But her father was already rushing out, phone in hand, probably calling his accountant. Richard Anderson Sr. stood shakily. Son, think about what you're doing. Oh, I have, father, for 15 years. James took my hand. The company's image could use some updating, don't you think? Less corporate greed, more social responsibility. Emma always said the measure of success isn't about how much money you make, but how many lives you improve. Victoria continued to scream, but I barely heard her. My focus was on the small silver ring I'd never taken off, remembering a young man in a coffee shop who wanted to change the world. You kept it, James said softly, touching the ring. You came back, I whispered. 6 months later, the Anderson Educational Foundation had funded 50 community programs. Victoria eventually married a minor European prince, someone who ironically believed in socialist policies. My parents became suddenly interested in charitable giving, though they mysteriously stopped sending invitations to family events. Richard Anderson Sr. retired to a villa in Italy but sent me a surprisingly heartfelt letter of apology. I framed it next to the newspaper article about our foundation's launch. As for me and James, we still go to that coffee shop in Boston. He still orders black coffee, no sugar, but now, when we talk about changing the world, we actually do it. The small silver ring finally has a companion, a simple gold band that matches it perfectly. The inscription, to my James, who came back to what really matters. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting it right.